Hi, my name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 39. What can Where's Waldo teach us about physical breaches? So, Where's Waldo? If you haven't ever seen Where's Waldo, you've probably never been inside of a dentist's office or a doctor's waiting room as a kid. But Where's Waldo is this book series where it's these giant landscape drawings of a bunch of people or a bunch of stuff. And there's this dude, his name is Waldo. He has a cane, a scarf, and a hat, and a shirt, and they're all red and white striped. And he is typically in these situations, and it's just a bunch of other red and white items, people, places, things like that. And you have to find Waldo in a sea of stuff that looks like him. And this has actually a lot to teach us about physical breaches and how they happen and how we can combat them. So, I don't want to over politicize this podcast ever, but I do want to talk about one very specific physical breach that happened very recently. As of recording this, July 17th, 2024, last week there was a political campaign rally by former President Trump, who is also the frontrunner for the Republican Party. And he had this rally, and there was an attempt on his life. 3 shots were fired, 2 people killed, and Donald Trump did receive a few wounds. And this happened because the shooter was able to get to a rooftop and target him. And it's kind of interesting because of some of the information that's come out. Because there's been a few pieces. So one of the things that came out is that the sheriff's department didn't feel like, or the police department that was around the area did not feel like they had the authority to stop the guy. The Secret Service, their preset boundary zone did not include that roof. And there were people who saw the guy before the shooting occurred, who tried to report him, and so on and so on. And these are all very interesting aspects because he got away with it. I mean, he ended up dying because, you shoot at a guy and you're isolated on a roof. There's not a really good way to get away from that. Anyway, one of the things that the news articles over the past few days have been covering is, how did this happen? How was he able to do this? And so on and so forth. And they've listed some of these reasons. And, so far as to say, it was an Iranian plot and all that. And the simple fact is, honestly, he got away with it, or he was able to do it because he had a ladder. And that's kind of full stop it. Like, the one common story that these news articles all have is that he had a ladder that he used to scale the building. And let me tell you, as a physical penetration tester, you can pretty much get anywhere if you have a ladder. There are videos online, YouTube videos of these college students getting into places where they shouldn't be by just carrying a ladder in. People will be helpful and open a ladder for you. They won't ask what you're doing there. They won't ask where you're going. They'll just let you through if you have a ladder because they believe you're supposed to be there. I mean, why would anybody just be carrying around a ladder? Oh, he must be doing something that requires a ladder. Oh, I gotta let him through. And this is all about how a physical security kind of starts. It's facilitating and lifting people's assumptions to your benefit. And so one of the things that Where's Waldo has is that Waldo blends into the background a lot because they don't necessarily show his full body. They don't show him do as just the person that he is. They kind of have him in just odd places. And the fact that everybody kind of has similar features or similar functions as him, it kind of makes it really difficult for you to see. So you really have to, kind of peer and look really hard at every section of the page in order to find him. And that is kind of how you're going to stop a physical security breach, is you're going to have to look hard and think about what is going on with a particular instance. So let's walk through a physical security breach. Let's walk through how we get into a place. Now, I will preface this and attempt to tell you, if you listen to this and you hear these things, please do not do anything illegal. Do not use this to do anything that could harm you, simply because there are very strong legal ramifications. Having an agreement beforehand when doing a physical penetration test is key. Making sure that you have a scope and that you have some sort of get out of jail free card when forming a physical penetration test. That is all going to keep you out of jail. However, if you do this, be prepared to be arrested. And, that is all things that can happen. You can have all the negative things happen. So please, if you do this, make sure that you have the proper agreements in place and do not do it just because. Anyway, with all that being said, if you're going to perform a physical penetration test, the first thing you need to understand is that you need to act like you belong. You need to have a purpose for being there. This starts out with either making sure that you mock up as an employee or as a vendor or somebody who should be at that location. In my youth, we would get into concerts for free by simply walking in the back, making sure that we knew what looked like people were doing, and then walking in the back. Like, honestly, we would go buy $5 worth of bottled water and then walk in with these things of bottled water, and they'd let us through, because why would anybody just be carrying around bottles of water? They must be here for the band and must be carrying bottled water to help facilitate the band's requests or whatever. But yeah, you get into the back that way, and then you just move along. But you need to have some sort of way to look like you're supposed to be there. And that's what the ladder trick kind of does. The ladder trick is, why would anybody be carrying a ladder? Oh, he must be here. I must have to let him in. You would be amazed at how many people just allow you to come in with a ladder. A clipboard, though, while less common now, a clipboard is a really good way to do it. A probably more common thing to have is a iPad or tablet that is in a tough case or an OtterBox, so it looks like it's something that is company owned. And one of the other things to do is to make sure you dress the part. So, you want to make sure that you're not dressing up for a place where people don't dress up. You're not in a suit and tie going into a power company. You're not in jeans and a t-shirt trying to get yourself into a Fortune 500 company. You're going to want to make sure you look the part for where you're trying to get into. Now, all that being said, once you get to the place you're trying to get into, there are a few key pieces of things that you need to remember. So the first off is impersonation starts with looking like you belong. So we've covered that one. The second is not being afraid to fail. If you are nervous and constantly trying to be perfect it's gonna set you back. You need to not be afraid to fail. You need to walk into the situation being like, I'm supposed to be here. If somebody challenges me, it doesn't matter because this is where I'm supposed to be. The next is, don't give reasons for people to ask why you aren't there. And then the fourth thing that you want to do is you want to intercept concerns. So you want to do all of this kind of simultaneously while you're in the middle of a physical breach. So that second one, not being afraid to fail, this one is very important because physical penetration testers and those of us who have been doing it for a long, long time will tell you that the easiest way for somebody to spot that you don't belong is for you to be super nervous and constantly coming up with excuses for everything and being too talky. One of the things that a lot of people do when they get nervous is they talk. And if they're, they feel like the external camera on them is so acute that they have to come up with an excuse for everything that they're doing. And they overshare and they overtalk, and it makes it really difficult for them. When you're doing a physical penetration test and you're acting like you're an employee, one of the really easy things to kind of excuse any sort of nervousness or not knowing where you're at or not knowing the things that you're supposed to know as an employee is stating the simple fact that this is my second day here. They just kind of threw me out here. That will alleviate a lot of concerns. That'll alleviate a lot of problems, and that will explain some of your nervousness and some of your slow to react or not quite direct or purposeful actions. And so that's kind of one. The third one, don't give reasons for people to ask why you aren't there or why you aren't supposed to be there. This is a good one because one of the things that you will do is, as a physical penetration tester, you don't want to give people the opportunity to challenge you. You don't want to give them the opportunity to challenge you. And one of the best ways to do this is, by instinct, it's going to feel like you're going to want to avoid people in a position of authority. And this is actually counterintuitive when you're doing security breach. When you're doing a physical security breach, you actually want to seek out the people who have authority in the organization or the area where you're trying to get into. This is because people aren't going to assume that you're going to want to talk to those people. And one of the ways that a lot of penetration testers will get into a place is they basically will be like, hey, I'm here for this. And then when they get challenged by somebody, they'll say, oh, well, I'm scheduled supposed to be here. And then they'll find an excuse to go and talk to the supervisor. And they will attempt to basically do anything they can to get the greeting party to leave them alone. Basically, leave them alone so that they can walk to or go to the supervisor or manager by themselves. And the reason for this is because the supervisor, what they do is they don't actually talk to the supervisor. They go towards there and then act like they, wait a few minutes and then act like they've talked to the supervisor and come back. This does a lot of things. The first thing that it does is as you're coming back from the manager's office, that's where people see you coming from. So they assume that you've had that conversation. They assume you're supposed to be there, and they assume that it's no big deal because you're not being accompanied by the supervisor or manager. The second thing that it does is that once you've come out of that area and you now basically injected trust into the situation, if that manager now leaves their office, supervisor leaves their office or comes out into the work area, they're going to see you there, and all of the other employees are looking normal and acting like you belong there. That's going to make them think you belong there. And so they're not going to challenge you because they trust their employees. This is one really good way to not give anybody a reason to think that you don't belong there. Give them reasons to think you've already done the work to validate yourself. And you don't have to actually do any of the validation. You just have to act like you've done it. And then intercept concerns. So this kind of flies in the face of the first one where it's like, where you're not being afraid to fail, where I said, don't be too talky, don't overshare, don't do things like that. And intercepting concerns basically means you have to plan for when people are going to be like, well, what are you doing? I don't understand why you're here. I don't understand why in a physical penetration test, often one of our goals is to see how many computers we can either steal or see how many computers we can plug stuff into or see if we can find a network closet, things like that. And when you are walking through physical penetration tests and somebody's asking you, if you're wandering around looking for a network closet, the easiest way to find that, by the way, is to just walk past doors. And if you hear the hum of switches, you found a network closet. But it looks kind of odd as you're walking through these halls, walking through these doors and trying to find one of these closets that has network equipment. So you want to intercept concerns and be like, if you're walking around trying to listen for these switches, you can be like, oh, you can actually be upfront about this. That's what I've done. And be like, oh, well, I'm here to manage to try to find a network closet, and they just told me it was going to be here, and I have no idea where I'm at, and they just pointed me in this direction. And always, you always say they, and if they say who, you say, oh, it's somebody at the front, and you just give nondescript description, and people will just be like, oh, okay, they'll make assumptions. You allow people to make assumptions on their own. Anyway, as you're doing a physical penetration test, the important thing is another important thing to remember is that as you are progressing through the physical penetration test and you're attempting to achieve your goals, that once you have really established trust and you've gotten to where you need to be, you can almost do anything. It is embarrassing how many people, once you've established trust, it is embarrassing how much they will let you do. Because literally walking out with equipment is one of the easier tasks. It sounds hard because you have to leave and come back, but it is honestly one of the easiest things I've ever done is walking out with equipment. You say, hey, I have to take this. I'll get a replacement out to you next week or tomorrow or whatever. And, you act like it's a big inconvenience for you and it's a big inconvenience for them. And you make sure that you sound like you're understanding, but you can literally steal stuff from in front of them. When compromising a location, it's important to just know how to talk. Now, another thing that you have to remember as a penetration tester is that there is no way that you are going to get angry. You want to appear kind and helpful, and you want to make sure that when challenged, that you appear confused at why you're being challenged, but ultimately, relieved that you're being that there are challenges in your way. You never want to be mean. You never want to accost anybody. It's just very much a situation where you just go with the flow. You want to be kind. You want to be nice, and you find opportunities. You make your opportunities to excuse your behavior, to excuse your presence. And that will get you in and keep you in most places. Now, again, in the circumstance of this recent assassination attempt, this guy, obviously, he didn't have to really talk to anybody. He just did. So, part of the problem part of the environment that he leveraged was that he was able to leverage the confusion between different jurisdictions of power, which is also very important to know, is that, if you are in an environment where you can, where there are multiple jurisdictions, it's very nice to know where those lines are drawn and how you can manipulate them. Now, this guy probably didn't know exactly where the Secret Service's jurisdiction ended, and this guy probably didn't know that the only people who were around who had control of the area were the police department, and they would be hesitant to deal with anything that the Secret Service hadn't dealt with. But he did leverage it, whether he was knowingly doing it or not. He took advantage of that situation. And you can do this too when you're doing a physical penetration test. If you are in an environment where you have some hierarchy or you have some confusion between environments, it's always easy to leverage that. And a prime example is acting like your IT, because there are very few people who have more access to more things than IT. IT has access to literally every system at every company everywhere. And you can act like them. You can act like you're coming from them, and you can take advantage of that jurisdiction. Or you could do facilities. Facilities also has a very wide scope of access in almost any organization, and it's all physical for facilities. And if you act like you're from facilities, or if you act like you're from IT, you can sort of take advantage of the blurred lines between those jurisdictions of everything else. Because, while financial computer systems might be the finance departments, IT does have to end up supporting them, and so they do have the ability to touch them and do things to them and work on them. And so leveraging this sort of blurred line of jurisdiction is another really good way to get through this. So now that I've talked about how you go about a physical penetration test or physical breach, how do you combat this? Really, how do you combat this? Well, this is where Waldo can help us. Again, you're looking at this page of just a ton of shit. Ton of people doing crazy shit. Guy has a beach umbrella up his butt. Dog is carrying around a severed head, and a Yeti is surfing on the back of a walrus. These are all things that have happened inside of a Where's Waldo book. Don't ask me what drugs the guy was taking. They were probably pretty good, but these things are all distractions. And one of the things that you can do to help combat a physical breach is to treat every instance with scrutiny, is to look across the page. It is very difficult for a person or a company who has to be public facing to restrict access to everybody. One of my previous clients was a hospital system, and hospitals have to let people in. And it was a little bit easier during COVID because you could say, oh, well, they don't have a doctor's badge and they don't have a visitor's bracelet or a visitor's badge. They're not supposed to be here. But hospitals are public areas, and there are people who are wandering around who don't necessarily belong there or work there or who are being treated. And so you can't just kick anybody who looks normal out. But in a hospital system, in a company, when you're being approached and when you're finding somebody who isn't supposed to be there, the first thing you need to do is verify their identity and not be afraid to do this. And this is the key. This is one of the things I preach to all of my clients, is you have to empower your people to ask questions. And one of my clients, they said that their biggest problem with physical breaches and validating credentials is that some of their people will get up in arms and actually yell at their coworkers for challenging them. And I have to say, if this happens in your organization, you need to fire the people who are doing this. I don't care how high up the chain they are, I don't care how long they've been there. But if they start yelling at other people for challenging them, they need to be fired because they are a security risk. They are the ones who are causing an issue, who are creating a problem where they present an opportunity for an attacker to get in. So make sure your people aren't afraid to be challenged. And one of the ways you can do this is by creating games for people to challenge others. And in fact, Where's Waldo is a great game for them to have. Basically, what you do is you create a badge that has Waldo's pictures on it, and you hand it to an employee, and you say, you are going to go out, and you are going to just walk through. And the first person that comes to me and says that you have the Where's Waldo badge this week, they get a $25 gift card or whatever. That is one of the ways that you can enforce people to stare at badges and to make sure they understand who belongs and who doesn't. These are things that you can do. Very easy. And they're cheap in comparison to getting breached. They're exceptionally cheap. And so, making sure that your people are empowered to ask questions. That's gotta be one. Making sure that they can treat every situation with scrutiny. Making sure that they have the time and the resources available to challenge people who do not belong. One of the ways that I was able to get in through concerts was that generally during the prop up of a concert, it's extremely busy. People are doing shit everywhere, and people don't have the time to sit there and pay attention to everybody who's coming and going. And so it's very easy to insert yourself in the line, which is why the busyness of the Where's Waldo pages makes it difficult to spot him, which is why having that guy with the umbrella up his ass and the walrus and Yeti surfing duo are kind of key, because the page becomes so busy, it's difficult to spot this dude who is not inconspicuous. He's very much a bright red and white flag, and it shouldn't be hard to spot him, but it is because of how busy the page is. So in our environment, in your work area, you need to make sure it's not so busy. You need to make sure that there's an opportunity for people to challenge you and to challenge each other and to spot the things that don't belong. Otherwise, they're going to miss out. Now, another thing that we can do to help alleviate a lot of this, a lot of issues within the physical breach area, and making sure that we've secured a physical breach, is to provide the opportunity for people to succeed and limit the number of things that can go wrong. So, putting out and creating an environment where people have to have proper credentials. They have to have the things in order to get in there. Things like badges and prox cards and locks and doors and man traps and bollards. Creating these things or putting them in place where they're limiting the traffic flow in and out of sensitive areas is going to be key. At a bank, one of the things that they have is that they have codes that rotate, and they have doors into all of the back areas. I mean, most banks now, and the vaults for where all the money is kept is not right out in the open. It is back, locked away, hidden behind at least one door. And so to get to it, there's a lot of challenges that have to be met, and there's a lot of things that have to be done to get there. And so, making sure that there's not any opportunity that there can't be a crime of opportunity is how you're gonna be able to prevent a lot of physical breaches and a lot of issues from your security issues. So, anyways, that's physical security breaches. That's one, how you can commit a physical security breach, and two, how you can stop it. Ladder test is gonna be very easy for you to do. And if you wanna get really anywhere, follow the ladder test. And on the flip side of that, if you see a guy with a ladder, maybe, just maybe, ask him what the fuck he's doing there. And maybe stop him from doing whatever the fuck he's doing without presenting a reasonable explanation for why he's there. Just saying. Alright guys, I hope you have a great day.